A disappointing first defeat in 18 games for Arsenal against Aston Villa at Villa Park. A game Arsenal had to play without many of their key players and with fatigue evident across the starting 11. We'll also be discussing Andrea Berta's secret meetings that could help Arsenal's season in January. So let's get into it. Hello Gunners and welcome to another video, and I would forgive you for feeling very deflated after that defeat to Aston Villa, one in which meant Manchester City closed the gap to the top to 2 points. But one thing which was positive from the game was the performance of Martin Odegaard. The Arsenal captain started in the middle of a midfield three, with Eberechi Eze being pushed out wide. He completed the most passes for Arsenal with 57 in the game and also created 3 big chances, one of which was for Bukayo Saka, who set up Leandro Trossard to start what we thought would be an Arsenal revival in the second half. With Odegaard starting through the centre, it does beg the question about Eberechi Eze, who was hooked at half-time for Leandro Trossard due to not being effective during the game. So, Mikel Arteta, how do you see Arsenal maximising both Eberechi Eze and Martin Odegaard? Because I think it's pretty clear that Eberechi Eze is far more impactful from the middle of the park, and so is Martin Odegaard. Whilst we're on the topic of substitutions, I think it was nice to see Mikel Arteta be reactive. He saw that Arsenal weren't having the best of first halves, so he sought to change things at half-time, with Mikel Merino coming off for Victor Gyökeres and Leandro Trossard coming on for Eberechi Eze, as I've said. It was nice to see Leandro Trossard back on the pitch. It had been a couple of games since he had last seen himself on the pitch, and he made an instant impact, scoring in the 52nd minute. Nice bit of movement into the back stick and a nice tidy finish. Although there were 2 players on the line, it was a difficult angle to get a shot on that goal. Something which was frustrating is that Leandro Trossard had to come off later on in the match due to injury. So again, Arsenal's injuries piling on. Is this a question towards Mikel Arteta regarding the really rough and intense training structure? Or is it just players coming into games and having unfortunate situations whereby they do get injured? I mean, the competitions for places at Arsenal is extremely high, and players want to make an impact in the little minutes that they get. And that was evident with Leandro Trossard, with the passion he showed once he was on the pitch and once he did score. One thing is for certain, despite the competition for places, Arsenal's best centre-back duo is Gabriel Magalhaes and William Saliba. And I think it was evident today that Arsenal missed the pair. Piero Nketiah and Julian Timber, great players in their own rights, but they found it really tough to deal with Aston Villa's long balls. It was clear that Unai Emery had identified the two as areas that Aston Villa could overrun us, with Ollie Watkins, Morgan Rogers all going right up against them. Another thing was that Arsenal were fatigued. You could tell that in the middle of the park, Declan Rice and Zubimendi weren't quite up to scratch, and that comes down to potential squad building issues. Miles Lewis-Skelly, who's been played as a left back, hasn't even been tried in midfield, so trying him in such an occasion would have been extremely risky. Even Christian Norgard, a player which Arsenal acquired in the summer, hasn't been given the responsibility to play in such high stakes games. Maybe that is a question mark on the recruitment team there. But Arsenal have a huge opportunity coming up, and with that only being our first defeat in 18 games, there's no reason to panic whatsoever. Players will be getting back and fit, so there's opportunity for Arsenal to get a run together. And we must remember, we're still top of the Premier League title. So there's that for us to hang on to and for us to propel us forward. On a more positive note, you may have noticed that there was no Gabriel Jesus and Max Dowman on the Arsenal bench. That's because they were involved in an under-21s game against Manchester United under-21s in a behind-closed-door friendly. Gabriel Jesus, Max Dowman of course, and actually Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain featured in the friendly as Arsenal got a 3-0 win. Reports suggest that Max Dowman actually scored one of the goals, so our young star is showing that he can keep making impacts, and who knows, we may need him as soon as the game against Bruges on Wednesday, with Arsenal desperately needing rests for big players. Quite interesting to see Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain involved in the game, and who knows, with Arsenal's current rate of injuries, we may even need him to step in and do a job for us. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but it is a nice gesture from the club to give Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain some opportunities to gain some sharpness, as he's currently without a club. Whilst we're on the topic of injuries, Christian Mosquera has been ruled out for 6 to 8 weeks with an injury he has picked up against Brentford. And questions has been spiring around the Arsenal fan base regarding what Arsenal should do to combat this. And Mikel Arteta, when asked in a press conference on Arsenal's activity during the January window, did not rule out a possible move for a player if the circumstances suggested that was needed. And one player which has been talked about a lot from Arsenal's perspective is Jeremy Jacquet, who currently plays for Rennes, a young French defender with so much ability and quality. It was actually reported by Fabrizio Romano last summer that Arsenal were willing to make a move, but the defender wanted to stay until 2026. And Arsenal, respectful of that, have backed away. But as we enter into 2026, there are questions whether Arsenal should make that move for Jeremy Jacquet in January or just wait until the summer. But one thing is for certain, Arsenal's injuries aren't slowing down, and at the excessive rate that we're getting injuries, it would be silly if we didn't even consider making such a signing if he was available in January. Another player in which Arsenal have been of interest in the last recent days is Bouaddi, a young defensive midfielder that currently plays for Lille, who has so much qualities. He's been likened to a young Declan Rice in the way he approaches tackles and the way he carries the ball. Unfortunately, Bouaddi has just signed a new contract with Lille that will keep him at the club until 2029. But suggestions are that there is a release clause in the contract, and with the way that it was reported, Andrea Berta had actually had secret meetings with Bouaddi's entourage discussing potential move in January and also the summer. So who knows, that might not be off the cards. And with how Arsenal's midfield is currently extremely fatigued, it would be silly for us not to go in and get someone there, because it's clear to see that Mikel Arteta does not trust Miles Lewis-Skelly or Odegaard to play significant minutes in the Premier League in the middle of the park. Whilst we're also on this transfer topic, another player which has been picked up in reports is Barcola, who's currently not happy with his contract situation. It was suggested in the summer that he was going to sign that contract, but those talks have slowed down. Arsenal, Liverpool are all interested in him, and Andrea Berta has apparently been holding some meetings with his entourage, with Arsenal ready to push hard for him as well. So, Arsenal looking ready to go into the French market, Bouaddi, Jeremy Jacquet and Bradley Barcola. All players with extreme quality and youth on their side. It remains to be seen if Arsenal do make the move for any of those in January, but it is exciting to see that Andrea Berta is ready to be proactive in the case that Arsenal need him to be so. But anyway, that's it for now. Let me know your thoughts on things discussed in this video, and until next time, peace.